The Competition Act is a federal piece of legislation that sets the guardrails for what we consider to be fair competition in the Canadian economy.
The history of that piece of legislation, of course, predates the 80s. So when we look historically, we see that Canada has long been thinking about competition and what it means for the country and the guidelines that govern marketplaces.
Competition matters for a number of reasons, both big and small. Competition really is about the balance of power between different groups in the economy. When that balance is intact, we get a fair deal as consumers, workers, entrepreneurs.
And it's one of those things where you can really start to feel and observe its absence. So we care about competition because it helps motivate more and better innovation. Dwindling competition hurts productivity growth, business investment, and ultimately the entire economy.
But unfortunately, after 40 years, we see that even with those reforms, there are still issues with the laws we have on the books. So a major issue with Canada's competition law is that it wasn't really a big fan of competition. Countries around the world are also reevaluating the ideas at the heart of their own competition law and updating their own laws to better protect their economies and citizens from the harms of monopoly.
It had become too static, right? It was feeling a little bit dusty. It had last been updated before the kind of hinge of the digital evolution, or kind of that exponential growth, that exponential era, and that made it feel outmoded. Now we're seeing a different reaction from Canadian policymakers.
Canada's competition law is rooted in a very efficiency-focused mindset, and we've seen that actually hasn't translated to a very strong defense of competition.
There seemed to be more and more of a consensus around this drumbeat that Canada needs more competition. There were questions, right? Do we tend or trend towards consolidation because we don't have the right frameworks? Or do we have the right framework and we just under-enforce it?
This review is so important because it gives us an opportunity to rethink some of the foundations of Canada's competition law and decide on potentially a new path going forward. Because it's such an important piece of legislation, what voices are being heard, who's at the table, is important to understand what the future of this law might be, and how that might, the presence or absence, might affect the outcomes for policymakers.